Hi everyone, this is James from Bezel World. Thanks for watching today, and look, ahead of time I apologise for the shitty camera work. The reality is I'm doing this off a cruddy little webcam right now, so I really need to get into gear and get something decent so that I can give you guys some better images and quality. Because certainly this is not going to be good today. But give me a few days and I'll get a decent cam in. Okay, so moving right along. So I've had a bit of an interesting week. I think yesterday or the day before I actually got on a auction site and thought that I had scored a little steal and picked up a watch and had it shipped out to me. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite what I expected. So I guess the first thing you probably need to know is I've always had a love of aviation and pilot watches, and so obviously the Citizen Skyhawk range, and in particular the Blue Angels range, has always been on my radar. Mainly because it's got the wanky E6B slide rule around the outside, allowing you to do all sorts of calculations. So I figured it's about time I had a really decent little pilot's watch, and thought I would go on the cheap side and actually get a Citizen Blue Angels second hand. So I guess without further ado, I should take the top off the box and we'll see what we've got. Again, apologies for the cruddy camera work. Okay, so what we actually have here is a Citizen Blue Angels. Now, it's actually the first generation, not the second or the third. So there is a different case size, and the layout is actually a little bit different. Now, the first thing you probably notice about it is it looks quite plain. As far as it doesn't visually stand out, even with the yellow, and that's pretty true. So the first thing I noticed is it's hard to bloody see, which isn't great if you actually want to use some of the features on the watch. The case size is supposedly a 41mm, but the reality is it wears incredibly small. It's not something that would look out of place on a tiny little wrist, because it feels more like some of my watches, which are sort of 38mm. So it doesn't wear big at all. It's got quite a thin profile. So I'll just take it out of the case. So it is quite a small watch. That's the reality. So around the outside on the bezel, or bezel as Archie Luxury likes to say, you've actually got the slide rule, and I know it's hard to see on this rubbish camera, but you've actually got the slide rule that you can do calculations for fuel and time and a bunch of other stuff. Unfortunately, the biggest knock on this watch straight away is the fact that you cannot see the thing. There's too much going on the face. It's such a small case, and I don't think I could ever make any calculations on this at all. It's just too hard to see. I mean, the reality is these days most pilots are carrying little handheld ECB flight computers, so you can actually do your calculations on that, or they carry an E6B wheel, what they call the whiz wheel. Basically a little card that they can spin around and get the same things. This is far too small. I mean, I would challenge anyone, especially whilst flying, to be able to do calculations on the spot with it. It's just too hard to use. It's got a steel, call it steel, steel bracelet with it. But I think the reality is it feels incredibly cheap. The quality of this is not great, and yes, it is a second-hand piece and an older piece, but it's not an awful shape. But there's a lot of stretch, a lot of wiggle, a lot of movement with it. The clasp is quite loose, and I'll just pop it open. It's got a very cheap feel to it. In fact, to be honest, I've actually seen better straps on better bracelets on a Steinhardt than I have on these. On the back, you've got the Blue Angels livery, and it's quite nice. I mean, these things are done relatively well. It's an okay watch. Now, with a lot of the functionality on it, you can change from multiple time zones. You've got hands, you've got UTC, and you can set this in a variety of places. Um, Unfortunately, this watch doesn't work. So that is absolutely great, isn't it? I've already got my money back from the seller. The reality is he didn't know it was sitting on the shelf. He decided to sell it. The pusher buttons are actually stuck on a couple of sides, and for whatever reason, you cannot change the time or set the time. So that's not great. I looked at the cost of a replacement movement, and it uses a Caliber 300, a C300 movement from Citizen, and just the cost of the movement alone is about the $120, $110 mark, and it's hardly worth it for a cheap second-hand watch. That's the reality of it. But assuming it would be working, you set the time by pulling the bottom button out, and then you can, using the mode button here, you can actually scroll through the various areas and select what you want and change the functions and the time, etc. Look, usability wise, I'm sure it would be very good on a larger case diameter. As it stands, it's pretty hard to see. Um, it would certainly be incredibly hard to see over night time, especially with these tiny, tiny, tiny little dials. So, I mean, I'll actually put this on to give you an idea of scale, and I've got a little wrist. So, let's put this on. Okay. So, to give you an idea, I've got a tiny little wrist, and that is tiny. So, it wears incredibly small. It also feels very, very cheap. I wouldn't suggest this would be something you would sort of buy. I mean, given the price, I mean, look, when these were selling new, they were a fair bit of money for a cheap watch, especially for a quartz. And even the Gen 3 ones, certainly you can see them going for around about the $400-500 mark. And honestly, there's better money to be spent. I wouldn't recommend buying one of these, even with the newer models with the larger case size. Um, I think you're better off looking at Seiko Flightmaster and having a look at what that's actually got, because I think it's a much better watch and a lot more quality and care has gone into dressing the case and the bracelet. So yeah, pretty much a big fail for the week. The seller was really good; he gave me my money back straight away, but it's not great. I'm assuming he probably knew there was something wrong with it prior to sending it out to me, because he was far too quick in refunding. He didn't even want this back because he obviously knew the cost of repairing or replacing the movement was just too much. So there you go. That's a quick and dirty review of a Citizen Blue Angels Gen 1 with the C300 non-working movement. Yeah, I don't have too much else to say other than it's far too small. I'd give it probably 2 stars out of 5. If you're going to spend that money, there's plenty of other options to get a decent watch. You could probably, for the $500 mark, you can certainly get a decent mechanical. If not a really decent quality quartz, you can even probably have a look around and get a decent Seiko Flightmaster. So that's it. That's James at Bezel World signing off, and as always, I would suggest if you want to see decent quality watch content and not the crap that I pump out, go and have a look at Archie Luxury or Paul Pluter's channel. Thanks, guys. Bye.